Chapter 3. Mark and the tall man kicked their boots against the sill one after the other, shedding the caked snow and brown powder that clung to them. Above the doorway, the sun-faded sign still read dormitory, though whatever purpose it once served had long since decayed. Inside, the building felt more like a converted garage than a proper barracks. Rows of bunk beds lined the walls, some stripped bare, others with rifles slung lazily over the posts. At the far end, a wood stove hissed faintly. Its door hung ajar, letting curls of warm red glow seep out onto the concrete floor. High above it all, draped from the rafters like a judge's robe, hung a red flag bearing the black sun, 12 jagged arms spiraling inward around a black disk, like blades spinning not to cut, but to pull, to devour. It radiated no warmth, only power. The walls were cluttered with chaos, yellowing newspaper clippings, crude pencil drawings, war propaganda, and posters. Among them, pin-ups of naked women spread wide in seductive poses, portraits of Adolf Hitler, and most prominently, a sea of swastikas, some sharp and new, others fading with time. "That was a mess," Mark muttered, collapsing onto the bottom bunk near the door. A real mess. From below, he stared up at the underside of the top bunk. Photos he'd taped there stared back. One showed a woman holding a toddler. He traced her face with a fingertip. "Yeah, it had to be done, though," said the tall man, dropping his gear beside another bunk. "I'm not saying it didn't," Mark replied, still looking at the photo. "Just, I don't know." "Don't get soft, Mark. You did what you had to. For our people." Mark echoed the phrase like a ghost. "Yeah, our people." The tall man, Morris, hoisted himself onto the upper bunk with a grunt and began unlacing his boots. "Mark, toss a couple logs in the stove. It's going out." Mark let out a sigh, thick with the weight of the day, then stood and walked over to the stove. He tossed in 2 logs and scraped kindling from the pile with a hatchet. Within seconds, fire bloomed from below, bright and hungry. "Morris," he said, not turning, "what'll they do to them?" "I don't know," Morris replied. "Question them, probably. Then a ride out to Africa, if they're lucky." He paused, then drew a finger across his throat and stuck his tongue out in a mock execution. "Jesus. Really?" Morris only shrugged. He kicked his boots off and sprawled across the mattress, stretching like a cat. "I don't know, man. Go ask your uncle. I'm tired." The dormitory door swung open. A gust of cold rushed in, colliding with the warmth inside and warping Mark's vision. For a moment, it felt like he was underwater, watching currents pass over him. He blinked, adjusted to the light, and stepped out. A narrow, poorly shoveled path wound down the snow-covered hill. At the bottom sat a large white Victorian house, its paint weathered and flaking. The neighboring homes were long gone, burned to their foundations, leaving behind only hollow footprints and charred basement mouths, yawning pits of blackness. In the yards, crooked sticks and rusted chicken wire jutted from the snow, marking buried vegetable plots. Behind the big house stood an old rusted shed, its windows boarded up and dark. The front door hung heavy with a swinging padlock. Mark's eyes caught a jumble of footprints pressed deep into the snow. Dozens overlapping, shuffled back and forth between the shed and the house's front steps. A faint murmur, muffled and tense, drifted from somewhere inside. Mark pulls his collar tight against his neck. His steel blue eyes, usually sharp with clarity, have dulled to a weary gray beneath the overcast sky. He tilted his head and sniffed the air. Smoke drifted down from the dorm chimney, bent low by the wind. Beneath it, he caught the faint smell of food cooking in the big house. Carefully, he made his way down the hill, boots crunching ice beneath each step. Coming around to the main porch of the big house, Mark caught the sharp scent of cigarette smoke. Sitting in a chair with his rifle leaning against the wall beside him was his uncle William. His head was tilted back, eyes closed, the cigarette burning lazily between his fingers. The scuffle of Mark's boots on the wood jolted William upright. "Shitbird," he grunted. "I hate it when you call me that," Mark muttered. "All in good fun," William replied, his voice rough. "You gotta earn your respect around here. Nothing's free." He took a drag and exhaled slowly. "You did okay today," he added. "It's not easy seeing shit like that, but you'll get used to it." He flashed his crooked yellow teeth in what passed for a smile. "I'm fine," Mark said, dry and distant. "I know you are. You're like your dad. You'll make a good soldier." William nodded toward the door. "Why don't you go eat? Luke's got a stew on." Mark hesitated. He wanted to ask about the captives, but thought better of it. He gave a silent nod and stepped inside. The warm, rich smell of beef stew wrapped around him like a blanket. The big house was surprisingly well furnished. Couches, tables, even an old flat-screen television that hadn't worked in years. In the living room, a large coffee table was cluttered with boxes of ammunition, gun-cleaning supplies, and a plate holding a half-eaten sandwich. Mark pushed through into the dining room, which opened into the kitchen. From behind, he saw Luke's bald head hunched over a bowl. The older man was sloppily spooning chunks of beef into his mouth, broth dribbling down into his white beard. "Hi, Luke. Any for me?" Mark asked, breaking the silence. "Mark," Luke grunted, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Let me get you a bowl. Greta stopped by with some supplies from town. Look at this stew." He nodded toward the pot. "She brought you some things too. Check that box over there." Mark slid the box toward him as he pulled out a chair. Inside were a few pairs of thick wool socks, new gloves, and fresh shoelaces. As he sifted through them, Luke set a steaming bowl of stew in front of him and slapped down a battered old spoon. The broth gave off a rich, comforting scent. Bits of fat shimmered on the surface, floating lazily in the steam. "Thanks," Mark said quietly. Luke went back to eating, his slurping loud and obnoxious. Mark stared at him for a moment. The old man was in his 60s. His scalp was bare except for a few wisps of white hair clinging on for dear life. His skin was darkened by years of sun and cold, leathery and weathered. His eyes, deep-set and sharp, still carried the kind of alertness most men had long burned out. Mark dug into the stew. It was simple, greasy, and deeply satisfying. He's a good guy, Mark thought. Luke was calm, and, most importantly, he didn't treat Mark's age like an invitation to lecture him on what Mark considered common sense. There was something comforting about sharing space with someone who didn't need to fill silence. Just two men eating soup. Their bowls were nearly empty when the front door creaked open. A cold gust swept into the kitchen, and light spilled across the floor. William stepped inside from the cold, casting an imposing figure. He wasn't exceptionally tall, but he was stocky, broad-shouldered, solid. His hands were large, scarred, and dry. "Frickin' cold out there, Jesus," William muttered, brushing snow from his sleeves. "I shouldn't have to smoke outside. It's not like this is a long-term arrangement." He looked at Luke with ironic annoyance. "You could always quit," Luke snapped back, flashing him a grin. Bits of stew still clung to his beard. "Fuck no. You think I survived all I have just to quit now? Winners never quit, Luke." "What did your captives say?" Luke asked. Mark's ears perked up at that, The question came easily, but Mark heard the invitation in it. He leaned forward slightly, listening. "Not much," William said. "They didn't know anything. The guy we left with the slug was the girl's daddy. The other one was just helping. Told me everything, sneaking, stealing, and a whole lot of jigaboo bullshit." William peeled off his overshirt and tossed it onto the back of a chair. Then he pulled the chair out and sat down beside Mark. "Reminds me," he said, placing a heavy hand on Mark's shoulder and pulling him a little closer. "Tomorrow, you and Morris are going to take them back to Africa." He paused, then added, voice lowering, "But on the way, stop by the boneyard. Let 'em get an eyeful. Tell them no niggers can pass the river. This is their only chance." He let go of Mark's shoulder, then looked at him, like he wanted to say more. Mark didn't return the gaze. He just nodded. He got the message. "Bowl?" Luke asked. William nodded, still watching Mark. "Tomorrow morning. Sunrise?" William said. "Get them out." Mark finally looked up. "I'm on it." Without saying anything more, Mark gathered himself and his things to go. The older men watched in silence, save for the scrape of a bowl across the table. Luke sliding hot stew to William. As Mark turned to leave, Luke interrupted him. "Put some of this stuff in the thermos for you." He gestured to two small cylindrical thermoses, their caps off, steam rising in lazy tendrils. Mark nodded, capped them, and left with the box.